But we
Go on. Right, it is gone 7 o'clock on Wednesday, 23rd of July. Welcome to the Planning Committee. We have one item on the agenda this evening, and I'll go through the agenda as it is at the moment. Apologies and substitutions. We have apologies from Councillor Anand and Councillor Douglas, and we have no substitutions. No other apologies. Right. Urgent matters. I'm not aware of any urgent matters, and I don't see any indications on urgent matters, so we'll move on from there. Any declarations of interest?
Chair, I'm not sure if I'm meant to mention it, but I will, because it makes me feel a bit more comfortable, is that I know the owners, the previous and the current one, only from the point of view of having held charity and other events there.
Yeah, so okay. It's not going to impact your decision making this evening.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
That makes you comfortable. Good. Thank you. Okay. Any matters to be considered in private? I'm not aware of any. None have been brought to my attention, so we'll move on from there. Minutes of the 18th of June. Does the committee agree that's a correct record of the minutes held on the 18th of June 2025? Thank you very much. Site visit attendance. Right, let me just go through what I think it is. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Myself, Councillor Martin, Councillor Mahmood, Councillor Raza, Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Elwall, Councillor Jassel, Councillor Ball and Councillor Kumar. Have I missed anyone, or have I added anyone that didn't? Is that correct? Who? Councillor Kumar was there.
I was at the Merrick Road.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yes, yeah. I was very much. Yeah. and then I came to the mall and I waited about half an hour, so I wasn't sure, but I did try and get hold of people. Yeah. I did want to do that site.
Well, we did run quite late on
so I realised after.
Yeah, we did do other site visits that obviously not relevant to Merrick Road, but were relevant to the committee, and I hope the committee enjoyed those visits. It was certainly eye-opening to see things that have been built out, and also, of course, Ealing Studios, which was slightly different to homes that we saw. But yeah, hopefully the committee enjoyed that. If we did overrun slightly, so we won't try to pack so much in next time we do that, but we will continue in the vein of seeing some that have been built out. Sorry, Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. On that point, I'm on behalf of committee and myself, it was a very useful trip, and I think we should. We are thankful to you, to the officers, and the people who welcome on site, and I think we should continue to do this good practice to see what we are approving here in this chamber and what it reflects practically as a building. So this is a very useful trip, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. I know that quite a few photos were taken, and we might put that in the sort of end of year report if that's helpful. If we can forward any to Alex or the team, that would be good. Thank you, everyone. Right, let's move on to Southall Community Centre, Merrick Road. John, are you going to introduce this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, this application is to redevelop a banqueting hall in Southall to provide a residential-led mixed-use development of up to 22 stories. This is the site just south of Southall Railway Station and containing a 2-story locally listed building. The surrounding area has had major development in recent years for various large residential-led schemes of up to 23 stories. That you can see from this slide the number of tall buildings all around this site. And that includes large developments like the Arches development and the Margarita site, which you can see on the other side. What is proposed is a 22-story main building with 6, 8, 10 and 16-story side elements and a basement. It would have 976 square meters of community and commercial space on the ground and mezzanine floors and 215 flats above. Be largely car-free with only 4 disabled parking spaces, and there's communal amenity space on the first 6th and 8th floors, about 900 square meters of that. These 215 flats will make a large contribution to local housing needs, and 19% of them would be affordable by habitable rooms. In other words, 35 flats. This is clearly less than the 35% normally required, and the tenure mix proposed of 76% shared ownership and 24% London affordable rent also conflicts with the Council's preferred tenure mix. However, extensive viability assessments have been undertaken, and both the GLA and the Council's financial viability advisors agree that the scheme could not viably support more affordable housing or planning contributions. On balance then, with early and late stage reviews, the proposed affordable tenure mix and amount of housing can be considered acceptable, given the viability constraints of the site and the scheme. The site is currently occupied by a commercial banqueting hall with occasional community use. However, this building needs major refurbishment, and the wedding and banqueting business cannot fund this due to declining revenues and increased build costs. Commercial agents for the applicant note the existing use is not viable, and also a range of other commercial, community and residential conversion options of the building would also not be viable. However, with at least 7 other banqueting centres, wedding venues in the wider Southall area, with capacity for over 1,600 guests, the loss of this banqueting centre should not have a large impact on the local community. Now, this locally listed building would be lost. However, its character has already been eroded through alterations, changes to materials, its internal form, and its setting has changed over the years through loss of adjoining factory buildings. Its architectural interest has also been reduced through replacement of windows with double glazing, rebuilding of the roof, and unsympathetic extensions. And another locally listed building nearby, the Arches, just to the north on Merrick Road, has already been demolished, and this has further eroded the context of the locally listed building. In addition, this building is in poor condition and needs significant refurbishment, and neither the banqueting use or other potential commercial, community or residential uses of the building are viable. It would therefore be difficult to find a viable future use which would retain the existing building, without which it appears likely to remain vacant and deteriorate further. So in balance, any harm from the loss of this building we consider would be outweighed by the benefits of the proposal, including 215 new flats with 35 affordable dwellings, a new public realm area, improved landscaping beside the site, the enhanced appearance of a prominent site, and provision of new community and commercial space close to Southall Town Centre. Now, a development of up to 22 stories will be a tall building on a site not identified as appropriate for tall buildings, not within the town centre. However, it does lie in the Southall Opportunity Area, which is potential for taller buildings, and other tall buildings have been approved nearby. The height will be less than the approved Arches development just opposite, as you can see from this slide. The scheme also accords a London Plan policy guidance for tall buildings and the Ealing Housing Design Guidance, and the GLA hasn't raised any objection to this height of building. So in balance, we consider this tall building as acceptable on this site and reasonably in keeping with its surroundings. The scheme's design has been amended to reflect comments from the design review panel and council planning officers, including changing the orientation of both north blocks to provide a more appropriate massing relative to the Arches development, and reducing the heights of one of the northern blocks and both southern blocks. So with these changes, the development comprises a group of towers of different heights clustered around a courtyard at first floor level and with a public realm area on the northern part of the site, which is the area here. The tallest element is sited at the corner, slightly lower than the approved buildings on the Arches site, opposite across Merrick Road, before stepping down as the building moves south and west. The building would have a well-defined base, middle and crown, differentiated by different materials, colours and design. The varied heights of the different elements would create a stepped effect, visually reducing the overall massing. And the ground floor, as you can see here, has been designed to have commercial and community uses with quite active frontages along the northern and western facades, along with the public realm area to activate the street. So overall, the scale of the buildings and the design approach are considered to be of good quality and to complement other developments in this area. A new public realm area would be provided in the form of a civic plaza on the northern part of the site boundary, defined by a row of trees, adding to the existing row of trees on the west. Other public realm improvements are proposed along the northern and eastern frontages to Merrick Road and by a shared surface driveway along the southern boundary. These proposals exceed the London Plan target for urban greening. Turning to living conditions, most of the proposed flats, something like 88%, would be dual aspect units and would provide adequate living conditions. All the flats would have private balconies of adequate size, and external community communal amenity spaces are proposed on the first, 6th and 8th floors, accessible from the shared central core and designed as children's play space. Any overall shortfall in amenity space would be mitigated by contribution towards improved provision in Southall Manor House grounds. We don't think the development would have any significant impacts on the amenity and living working conditions of adjoining occupiers due to its design, orientation, and the separation distances from nearby dwellings and the orientation of windows. The scheme would achieve high standards of sustainable design and construction, including roof-mounted air source heat pumps and 2 photovoltaic arrays on the roof. Overall, site-wide CO2 emissions would be cut by at least 67.4%. Potential impacts with regard to air quality, noise, wind effects and land contamination can all be adequately dealt with by conditions. This is a car-free development apart from 4 disabled parking spaces. Transport services and TfL consider impacts on the local highway network acceptable, subject to financial contributions towards improvements to cycle infrastructure, bus services, bus stops, a footbridge across the railway line, nearby junctions, footways across near the site, and traffic calming measures and a review of the existing controlled parking zone. Section 106 contributions have agreed for all of these. And the site has a very good public transport accessibility, and with these planning obligations, including a restriction on resident parking permits, potential impacts from it should be satisfactorily mitigated. So summing up, in assessing the scheme, we see there are three main issues. The affordable housing is low, both in policy terms and compared with other schemes approved in the past. But viability has been exhaustively tested, and there's a general agreement the scheme cannot provide more units without lower Section 106 contributions. Secondly, this is another tall building in Southall, but it is surrounded by the tall buildings. It's acceptable in design terms and meets London plan criteria for tall buildings. And lastly, a locally listed building would be lost, but that building has already been greatly altered, requires major for refurbishment, and is not viable for its current use or other potential uses. So we consider its loss can be justified with the benefits of the scheme. So taking account of these benefits, which include a larger increase in the housing stock, 35 affordable units, community space and workspace, and some 2.2 million in Section 106 and CIL contributions towards infrastructure, community facilities, employment and training measures, open space improvements, etc. On balance, we consider it's acceptable. It's therefore recommended for approval, subject to legal agreements. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Did you want to mention the briefing note that came out this afternoon?
Not an awful lot in that. We've just added that as in addition to the other heads of terms for the Section 1 agreement, we should include a monitoring fee for actually checking what's been happening with making sure things are actually happening in the Section 106 agreement. And lastly, we did have a late response from TfL, basically because to meet the viability constraints of the site, we had to reduce quite a lot of the Section 106 contributions from what was originally requested by all the various consultees, and that included TfL. Their requests for a large contribution towards improving bus services was cut quite a lot. They're not very happy about that, and they are not sure that that will adequately mitigate the transport sustainability impacts of the development. But I think that's already covered in the report. So we've taken note of what they're saying, and they will be looking at it again and when it's referred back to them at stage 2.
Okay, I'm going to take questions. I'm looking over here first. Councillor Rice was first, Councillor Raza, Councillor Martin, did you? And then Councillor Kumar. I'll come back over here, won't it? Councillor Rice, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd just like to clarify about the shortage of play space that's being provided. I know it says that there'll be Section 106 monies going to Southall Manor and also to Southall Park to compensate for that. Now, my understanding is that normally when we have Section 106 payments that are going to be made, we just have a table and we have the amounts, and I'm normally told that we decide later when money is going to be spent. So if it's actually specifying here that it's going to be spent in Southall Manor and Southall Park, how can we actually ring fence that to ensure that it is spent there and the money isn't spent somewhere else? So it is actually spent on the children that live in that, from who will end up living in the development. So and also can I ask about the affordable housing? Now, the thing that does concern me is just looking at the kind of precedent that is set, because looking at it, there's a real shortage of affordable housing that's being offered, and it just doesn't seem to make sense. This is in Southall. We're not talking about in Ealing Broadway. We're talking about in Southall. So I just can't really get my head around it. If we can't make something like this work to ensure there's enough affordable housing in Southall, then really, I mean, we might as well just go home. It just does it. So that's how it feels like. So I'm just quite unhappy about that. So I'm just trying to get a little bit more explanation behind that. as well. Just with so it's just really kind of like the viability of if we can just really clarify about that viability there, and also about the play space. Thank you.
Hold it there, John. I'll take 3 questions if that's all right. Well, that was 2. So let me take Councillor Raza next, please.
Councillor Rice has already asked part of my question, but my concerns are with the locally listed bit. It's kind of sends a very bad, should we say, signal if we're going to repeatedly look at locally listed places in Southall and decide that we can ignore that. Whereas if we were to all imagine the building sitting bang in the middle of Ealing Broadway, I doubt very much that we would just brush it under the carpet as we are here. So I'm a little bit worried about the fact that what is the point of having a locally listed situation when we're going to just go, oh, we're just going to ignore it. It just seemed a little bit callous, and I don't see that the developers kind of made any kind of even a nod in the scheme to what was there before. I kind of don't think that there is, for years to come, there won't be anything left of that building, even if we were to take it down. In the past, we have seen schemes where people have at least tried to sort of have something to do with the building that was there before that needed coming down. But I kind of think this is quite a callous treatment of the situation. Thanks.
Okay, John, let's take those 3 if that's possible.
Okay. The first point was about whether we can ring fence the children's place-based contribution. I think that the Section 106 agreement can be drafted such that that particular contribution can be specifically allocated to these areas. So, and that's quite common. It's just that's not clear from the report necessarily, but when it's actually drafted in the legal agreement, that can be quite specific about where that money goes. So that should protect it from other uses. And the point about viability, well, I think the question you've asked is a question that we've asked too, and we've asked the developer that, and we've also asked our own viability advisor. The GLA have been asking that question for several years too. It seems to be a product of fast rising building costs and lower demand for, or lower growth in house prices and various other factors. I mean, this isn't the only scheme we're seeing where viability has been questioned. I suppose the main point is that it has been exhaustively looked at by 3 sets of viability consultants, both the applicants, the GLAs, and the council's own one. We've had 3 or 4 viability assessments. They've explored a whole range of other development options, including 100% affordable, a smaller building, a taller building, a mix of other uses and so on, and none of them were found to be viable. So even if we have some doubts about that, it's a bit difficult to question that when all the viability assessors are telling us, are giving us the same message that this scheme isn't viable, and are able to provide more affordable housing or more Section 106 contributions. And so I'm not quite sure if it's much more of an answer than that. I think we just have to rely on the viability advice we're given, even though it's not quite clear what all the factors are behind that.
Hold on, Councillor Rice. Hold on.
Just wondered if I could just look, and there's one bit that I forgot the time to mention about. I was actually just wondering about ensuring that the housing remains affordable, because we know that that shared ownership can be an issue sometimes, in order to make sure that it does actually remain as affordable housing, especially in light of elements such as service charges within a building. So I'm just interested to see them ensure that we do actually ensure that the housing remains affordable as well. Thank you.
Yes, our housing department is usually quite keen that the Section 106 agreement is drafted so that shared ownership rents are below a certain level to make sure they are affordable. So we can build that into the instructions to the legal department, I think. Yes, on the point about the loss of locally listed building, well, it's obviously regrettable that we're losing it, but on the other hand, the building doesn't have a viable use for it. The owners explored other potential viable uses and hasn't found any. So it's difficult to see what could happen to that building. If they can't find a viable use, it will continue to deteriorate. No one's going to refurbish it, and it will eventually, over time, probably be lost anyway. Obviously, we have approved the Arches development, which was also a locally listed building, for similar reasons. I mean, it just wasn't other viable uses for it. We just have to consider that in terms of government guidance, which says that if we're going to lose our heritage asset of this type, we have to balance the benefits of the scheme against what's being lost and how important that loss is. So overall, in the balance of things, it doesn't seem that the loss would be that critical to Southall, given the change in that area, the loss of other local listed buildings, and how its context has changed so much. And there are quite significant benefits from the scheme in terms of housing, affordable housing, even though it's not as much as might like, and the public realm and landscaping and various other things. I would also add there seemed to be quite a lot of local support for this scheme, which I was quite surprised by. There are actually more residents in support of it than we got objectors this time. So overall, it's a difficult decision, but on balance, we think it's probably the right one, that the benefits outweigh the loss of the listed building.
Chair, can I just supplement that answer as well?
You can.
Thank you. It's just worth noting that it's not a statutory listed building, so it's not grade 1 or grade 2. Also, buildings in a conservation have more protection in terms of the heritage asset than it is in a locally listed building. So what locally listed building essentially does is allow us to just have a look at its merits when we're looking at planning applications and weighing it against the benefits, as John had already explained.
Okay, let's move on. Councillor Kumar.
My question is on the external consultation. There's about, I think it's 8 authorities that have not responded. Is that not necessary? Because there's no response from them. I would have thought it is important to have that. Is that not relevant? And
It's not unusual for people
No?
not to come back.
Mm.
It's not unusual in a lot of planning applications for people not to come back, but I'll let John answer it in a minute, if that's all right. Yeah. Is that it, Councillor Kumar?
yeah, no, and Thames Water have said they expect the developer to demonstrate what measures will be undertaken to minimize groundwater discharges into the public sphere. Has that been done? And I think there was a comment by Heathrow Airport as well. So
I think you'll find that they have been addressed in the report, but I'm sure John will come to the ones.
yeah, I did
So Heathrow Airport, what was the other one? Thames Water.
Thames Water.
Any others?
Yeah, and sort of clarification on the NHS request as well. So if that can be, and my other concern is the London Fire and Emergency. So they have raised concerns. Have they been addressed? And clarification on the blue badge scheme. I know we asked the question at the site visit, and I think I was told it's 5. But it says here under TfL 6 blue badge parking spaces required, but only 2 proposed. So I just, I'm a little bit confused on that. So if that could be clarified.
There's 4. There's 4 blue badges in there. Okay. John, you might as well take those. There's a lot. But just if they're in the report, please just refer that they're in the report and they've been answered. Or, if not, can you answer, please?
Yeah. Okay. Just in relation to a number of consultees not responding, that is fairly common. Quite often, these consultees don't consider their responses relevant, or this development doesn't affect them. People at National Grid, for example, Waste and Street Services didn't really have any comment on it. Nor did the tree officer, because there's very few trees. Well, there's no trees on the site, and so on. So it's not unusual for quite a lot of bodies not to respond. Highways England, for example, didn't respond. It didn't really affect them. Environment Agency also doesn't affect them. So the various airport authorities did respond. National Air Traffic Services and Heathrow, they asked for conditions to be, and we put these conditions on. So they're quite happy with them now. Thames Water, I'm just seeing what they. Yes, they wanted various conditions and informatives. We put these on too. The NHS, they just requested a financial contribution towards healthcare services, and we put in a contribution. It's not as much as they've asked for because we had to reduce all the contributions because of the viability issues for the scheme. London Fire Brigade were consulted. There is some concerns on the initial fire statement. However, the applicants provided a revised one, and we've submitted that to them. They haven't come back to us yet. We're still waiting for them to comment, but we think all these points have been addressed in the revised fire statement. On the disabled parking, the applicant originally proposed 3 disabled spaces on site. It is quite a small site to fit much on. TfL wanted more. They wanted 6 just to comply with their policy requirement. The applicant said it was difficult to fit more than 4 on, so they increased the number to 4, but any more than that would take away other elements from the development. So, and it'd be pretty hard to fit in. You can see it's quite hard to fit in 4 at the moment. So we have sort of reached we think it's a reasonable compromise on the disabled parking.
Thanks, John. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. So the first one relates to the provision of community space in the new development. So in the report, it keeps combining commercial and community space together. So is there are they separable, if you like, or is it possible that we could end up with a situation where it's all commercial space and there ends up with no community space being re-provided? So that's one question. And the second goes back to the issue of viability again. So, I mean, we know that we generally ask for 35%, and that's the fast track route. If you put in 35%, our aspiration is to make that 50%. But what we're looking at with this is 19%, and also 19% that's made up the wrong way round, effectively. So I'm just wondering at what level would we draw the line and say there isn't adequate viability for a scheme to go ahead. I know what you've said about the change. Obviously, there are changes, economic changes that we're all aware of. I think a lot of those developments that have gone up or are going up around it probably had 35%. And at the moment, that may not be possible. But is that have we not got a question mark about whether this is the right time to develop this site if all we can manage is 19% affordable and it's mainly shared ownership? So I just wonder at what stage we would be thinking about how far do we want to take this concept of things being viable?
Right. Councillor Wall next.
Thank you. My question was going to be on viability as well, actually, so it kind of overlaps with Councillor Martin's. But I mean, this affordable housing offer seems so drastically low at 35 out of 215 flats. It just seems unparalleled low. I can't get my head around it. And the level of intermediate housing to affordable housing is complete, as Dee said, completely flipped. I'm just looking at the GLA comments too, and they've said about the previous application there was no affordable housing, and that was unacceptable. and they talk in terms of there would need to be a significant uplift for them to support it, and they would need to, the developer would need to meet the fullest contribution. It doesn't seem to me that this is complying with those. I just wondered what you might consider would be a significant uplift, or what would be the fullest contribution. And they also point out that it would cause harm to the loss of a non-designated heritage asset, which I get you've said the condition of it and the viability in that respect. But they do mention that it would need to be outweighed by the scheme benefits. And I think the affordable housing side of this, the viability, is an issue that really kind of mitigates against that. And it also seems to me that they've kind of robbed the Section 106 to beef up the affordable housing, but they still haven't complied with anything really.
Hold that thought, John. Councillor Ball.
I pressed the wrong button. Right. Yeah. Good. I got it on now. Yeah. So just one question. Could John expand on the comment in the briefing note that indicates about other Section 106 contributions for the scheme that were reduced on the grounds of viability? So which other aspects of Section 106 were also reduced, please?
Okay, John. There's quite a lot there. So
right. Maybe take the last question first. So in terms of the other Section 106 contributions, we had to make quite large reductions in pretty much all the Section 106 contributions. The ones we didn't really feel we could change were things like carbon offsetting, renewable energy monitoring, travel plan monitoring, and so on. But because there was quite such a big difference between the amount the scheme could afford and the total requests for Section 1 contributions, it was the largest requests that got cut the most. So these were the TfL requests for bus services, health, education, sports and leisure, town centre improvements. So these probably had the biggest cuts. There were most of the others that also had some level of reduction, but these were the biggest ones.
Go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in there as well, just to explain that when we receive comments on any planning application and there are references to Section 106 contributions that need to be sought, we do have to look at that quite carefully, and we also need to look at whether the asks are reasonable and whether they meet the tests for mitigating impact. So it's not unusual for some adjustments to be made to the overall package when we're looking at the finalising an assessment. So it's just to make you aware that that's not unusual in terms of our considerations when we look at the all matters in the round and we look at what's appropriate in terms of that mitigation level. Thanks.
I'll just point the committee to the slide that's showing at the moment, because that was a question that was asked on the planning bus on Saturday. So that's why it's up there. Okay. John, carry on. Sorry.
While that slide's up, I may as well just comment on it. I mean, this looks at some of the major developments in Southall over the last 8 years. You can see most of them had achieved 35% of affordable housing by rooms. However, the tenure mix quite often didn't comply with the council's preferred tenure mix. So you can see Honda's 100% shared ownership, Margravita's side 100% shared ownership, and so on. So, and some of these schemes, of course, haven't been built, which may be a factor of viability. I'm not sure. So even though the scheme is low in terms of overall numbers, there's a history here that we've accepted a tenure mix which is different from the council's preferred mix. Anyway, going back to the questions on the community and commercial space, the proposal is obviously for a large area of the ground floor to be a mixture of community and commercial space. The applicant hasn't separated these out. I think the aim is for it to be fairly flexible depending on what demand there is for it, because I know in previous schemes an applicant was proposing a community space on the ground floor and couldn't actually find any local community takers for it. So I suspect they want to keep it flexible. The space obviously would be dividable. It wouldn't be difficult to divide that into more than one separate bits for community and commercial space. We haven't got any conditions on it or other restrictions that would prevent them, that would stop them from not having any community space in there if they couldn't find it an occupier for it. So that's something that could be added if it was felt necessary. Going back to the viability, I mean, I think we've pointed out before that the 90% is quite low, but this is a scheme we've got before us. We have to make a decision on it. I think if the applicant went to appeal in this, I think we might be in a difficult position given that all the viability consultants have agreed this is the maximum the scheme can actually afford in terms of units and Section 106 contributions. And whether it's the right time to allow this development, well, I guess there's no guarantee what will happen in the future. It may get better or it may get worse, but we have to make a decision, or the government may have to make a decision on it at the present time, given the viability information that we have, even though it does indicate quite a low level. Going on to the third question, the GLA also agreed that this scheme was providing the maximum affordable housing that it was viable. So even though they wanted the local listed build to be justified by a full benefit of affordable housing, they're accepting this is what's proposed is as much as they're going to get. So that's a benefit to some extent. I think it's difficult to say much more than that. I'm not sure what level of affordable housing would make it more acceptable to lose the listed building, because all the indications and evidence we've got is that this is the maximum this scheme is going to be able to provide. So I can't really comment much more than that on that.
Chair, can I just supplement that
You can.
viability question? Just in terms of policy context, it does talk about 35% but subject to viability, and the viability, how it works is it's on the maximum reasonable amount. And as John explained, we had various scenarios tested, which didn't, so we looked at various different scenarios in terms of what would it look like if it was all London affordable rent versus, what the current mix is, and it's then, the percentage then reduced. So it is about then us, the local authority, thinking about what is the best outcome in this situation. But also just in terms of reassurances within the Section 106 and in the report, we do, with any viability scheme, we do have to secure early review mechanism and a late review to understand where's the development at just before it's going to come, after it's implemented. So to understand the viability position, then to potentially for the council to get any further contributions towards affordable housing, because the economy might change. And then again, later down at a late stage review, when it's about 75% in occupation, when the sales have gone through, then we can look at the viability position then to make sure that we have maximised every potential for the council to get additional affordable housing contribution. At that point in time, it will be through contributions through money, because you can't physically provide it on site, because you need an RP on board, and it's just the layout doesn't work like that. So yeah, so there are mechanisms in place that we can secure through Section 106 contributions to review the viability again later down.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask question on particularly the TfL request for 487,000 and the offer, which is 250, so a huge gap, notwithstanding officers' comments. But I think, on the basis of the answers we've heard to the questions, particularly on viability, tenure mix, the Section 106, enormous gaps, I really think this is a really some more work which I think can be done on this application. So I think, without wanting to prejudge the debate, I think I would like officers to go back to the developer to see if we can do some work to enhance the 19% offer and the Section 106 side. So I think I'm going to formally propose we defer this to a future meeting.
Okay, I've heard a deferral, so I'm duty bound to take that deferral. So I'm going to ask the committee, no more debate, no more questions. I'm going to ask the committee, bearing in mind what Councillor Gordon just said, and bearing in mind what the discomfort I'm thinking from the committee, that I'm feeling from the committee in terms of viability and where we are, that we ask officers to go back for another go, another round. Apologies to the officers. I'm sure you've done, and the struggle is carried on, but I think the committee are not proposing to turn it down. They're proposing for a halfway house here, which is to go back and have another look. I must add that, you know, we're talking about 19%, but it's actually 16.3 in terms of homes, and we're looking at. So no matter which way you look at it, it's not great. So anyway, I rambled on and I should have gone straight to the vote. Sorry, apologies. That's right. All those in favour of deferral, please show. That's everyone. Right, just for clarity, any of those abstentions? Any against? Right, so we're deferring this tonight for further discussions between yourselves and the developer. Thank you. Thank you for. Well, that's the only one on the list for tonight. The next committee is August the 20th. Right, August the 20th, and I see some of you here. Some of you be on the paddling in the swimming pools and etc. on the beach, I'm sure. But don't overdo it, because you've got work to do. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening, and I hope England win on Sunday. Thank you.